the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
This is HBR News, number 189. The Patron Purge, Fortnite fights, and Charlottesville driver James Fields convicted. With Mike J, Mike S, and Hannah W, as well as me, the Doge in Charge, Brian Martinez. Hello, everybody, and welcome to HBR News. Today's panel consists of, I have this problem where I talk faster than I think. And so sometimes my words slur together. I haven't been drinking alcohol, just coffee.
It's usually quite efficient until the moment you explain what you're doing, and then you lose several seconds for whatever you make up.
Yeah,
it's bad speedrun strats, man. It's not what you want.
I have to get better at that. So today's panel consists of Mike J, Hannah Wallen, Dr. Random McCam, and myself. Welcome everyone to the show. We have a great show lined up for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as in the comments section. On this week's HBR News Show, we're going to be talking about the recent banishments going on Patreon, as well as other areas of the internet, the conviction of one James Fields, the driver who killed Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, the viral video of the Fortnite streamer that assaulted a woman live, or is it that simple, and more. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. Also, join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. As the living meme Alexandria Ocasio-Rojo-Cortez prepares to take office, the ironically named Good Men Project, you know, those MRAs doing men's rights correctly by making it about serving women, yeah, those guys. They have proposed that the recent support for Red Cortez is a sign that, quote, it's time to be governed by women's. That's exactly what they wrote about. So thank you, Good Men Project, because without you, I wouldn't have anything to talk about in the after show. Let's find out what they have to say. Please join us. Anyway, if you'd like to be a participant in those after shows, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a supporter at Feed the Badger, because, I mean, we are looking at options outside of Patreon in light of what's been going on recently, and we currently have a model to help serve people who want to support us. Go to Feed the Badger and do it there. Alison's got all of that stuff worked out on her end while we're looking into other options, because it appears that staying on Patreon essentially puts us, let's say, on borrowed time. So instead of going to the usual place I usually send people, which is patreon.com/honeybadgerradio, go to badgerfeed.com. And also go to Feed the Badger. Feed the Badger to support us, Badger Feed to find all the content. Sorry for the confusion. So Feed the Badger. That's what we need, okay? All right. So now that we've got that all worked out, I also want to...
Love the backdrop, by the way.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
That picture was only recently taken, and it's everyone's putting it up now, and everyone's laughing at it and explaining what's funny about it, but I haven't seen anyone draw it yet. Like they drew the Jugon one, they drew the Anita Jew one. I reckon the first person to actually draw this is probably going to get subpoenaed.
Yeah,
or whatever it is.
But like,
don't quote me on this one, but I think it exists.
I'm sure it exists, but like, why do you need to draw it? It's right here.
I know,
you have the photo. Like,
it will, though. It will. It'll exist. I'm sure it'll exist. Somebody will draw that just because it's going to be fun for them to draw that.
Yeah, I could see that, but again, the photo is here. You know what I was gonna say when I saw this, because I saw this image on that article. I think it was it the Washington Post? I think that put this out there. I can't remember, but it was one of those, you know, typically more progressive leaning outlets that put out this article where you know, Rojo Cortez claimed that she has Jew in her lineage, that she comes from Jewish immigrants, right?
And they put this picture on that
article.
And they
put this picture on that article, and I thought, this is like, what would you call this? Next level deep cover memeing, like that's happening, like somebody.
It could be a coincidence. There could be people this sort of ignorant or innocent, naive, shall we say?
Yeah, it could be somebody that is a little older They might not know.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems
Oh
a
my
little
gosh.
convenient.
Self-awareness level can be zero, though.
Some
So
folks may call this a dog whistle.
Well,
Yes.
whoever's
Yeah.
making the decision to include that photo, there's several people above them in the hierarchy, all the way up to the editor, who don't know that meme.
Yeah.
Ignorant
Or
enough to
think it's
get it to get it to the front page. So why, if all of them are that ignorant and it's just a coincidence?
This, I mean, for me, this is like fourth dimensional trolling. That's what I think is happening.
yeah, I was gonna say, to be honest, having worked in the field of journalism in terms of small newspaper, if big newspapers have staffing issues in common with small newspapers, it's entirely possible. They really just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's hilarious. That's why I shared it. Besides the fact that the Good Men Project, here I'll show you guys the website, have this article. It's time to be governed by women, with a picture of Cortez. So I guess that is like their evidence. She is their evidence as to why it's time. By the way, we've had women in government for a long, long time, so I don't know what they mean by it's time, but we'll get into that in the after show. So, but for now, we're going to get into the actual topics. Let's start with the Fortnite story. So before Mike J reads it, I thought I would show the clip. So if you guys want to see what happened exactly. All right, can you guys see everything? Also, folks that are watching, how does the audio sound? Are we good, or am I like super loud, or what? Just let me know when you're able. I'll try to adjust. Okay, so can you guys see the video? I haven't started playing it yet, but you guys can see the screen, I imagine?
I can see it on my end, yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm going to go ahead and play the clip.
Can you not? I said I'll be out soon. Stop.
No
Stop.
computer, I'm
Stop.
sick of this shit.
Stop, please. I'll be out soon. Just stop. All I asked was for some time by myself.
Fucking woman,
Just go away. No one. Just go away. Leave me alone. I'll be out soon. How many times do I have to tell you? How many times?
All right. Mike J, if you want, go ahead and read the article. I mean that this goes on for a little while, so I don't want to.
It goes on for like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
That should be noted. That's the like truncated version. There is one with a lot more before that, but I could not find a version without somebody talking over it.
Yeah, there was like the original clip that I saw when Keemstar shared it, and I couldn't find that one anymore, and I don't know why. I did find a part 2 one that he put up, but you know, we anyway. If you guys have it, maybe tweet it at me or tweet it at Honey Badger Brigade on Twitter, and so that we have like the full version. But this is what we were able to get for a YouTube embed, so. Mike J, if you could tell us about the Fortnite thing, which, by the way, has nothing to do with Fortnite.
Really. No,
Really.
but of course it's known as the Fortnite thing because that's what's there in the background. Anyway, so last Sunday, while streaming the popular game Fortnite, Luke James Monday, better known by his Twitch name Mr. Deadmoth, was recorded on stream in an altercation with his girlfriend Grace. During the stream, Grace Monday can be heard urging him to stop playing and to come to dinner with the rest of his family. Luke repeatedly declines, becoming more agitated each time. Grace begins throwing objects at Luke, which further adds to his aggravation, which is something that many clips, including this one, conveniently cut out. And, sorry, I lost my place there. What happens next isn't exactly clear, as the camera does not allow us to see the entire situation, but it appears that Luke is struck with some sort of object, possibly thrown by Grace. Luke then rushes off camera, and a loud smack can be heard, following by Grace crying and yelling, which is what we heard in the clip. You're a fucking woman basher, and don't hit me in the face. Despite this, Grace continues to yell and throw objects at him, at which point he runs off camera, and Grace can be heard screaming once more. Should be noted that during all of this, the couple's 2 daughters, ages 3 and 20 months, can be heard in the background the entire time.
You say 3 months and 20 months, or 3 years and 20 months?
3 years and 20 months.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I should have put that. 3 years. You can clearly hear one of them can talk, so I'm guessing pretty sure that's a 3-year-old. Anyway, in the aftermath of the incident, Luke was arrested and charged with common assault, though he's since been released on conditional bail. He is expected back in court on the 13th of December. Luke has also been suspended from his job at the Australian telecommunications company Telstra, and his Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels have since all been deactivated or terminated.
I was about to say, I'm surprised this is the first time it's happened, but I guess I'm not. Because this isn't something that happens very often. You very often see a gamer's mother come in screen and whoop them until they get off the computer. You don't often see it, this kind of shit this way around. Almost everyone will be smart enough to turn off their shit before they do that.
Yeah. I was wondering, do we know if does this Twitch streamer make a living off of this on Twitch? And if so, is this his... So, okay, so it's not like this is his job.
If it is, he certainly isn't doing a very good job of it, because he's got, I think, just maybe a little more, had a little more than 5,000 YouTube subs. And like I said, his job was Telstra. He worked at the Australian telecommunications company. And I think he had a pretty good job there. He apparently competed to get it. He was a network engineer. And from what I remember, those guys make pretty decent money. So this was not a job. This was a hobby, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess the only thing I would say about that is that this is really, it's unfortunate. It appears that this is, for me anyway, it's a case of, childish people having families that don't know how to communicate with each other and tend to resort to, insults, abuse, and violence. And unfortunately, because this guy retaliated, let's say that she initiated, which it seems to me that she did. He retaliated, but he suffered the consequences. Yeah, no, it seems like that's the case. The only problem is that we can't see it, but if you look at it doesn't, it looks to me like he was responding. Now,
I was going to say, throwing things at somebody is starting it. It
is. Regardless
of what happened off camera, and regardless of how wrong what happened off camera is, the moment that, the pattern that goes on there, the heckling followed by throwing things, followed by the explosion, that is exactly what Aaron Pitsey described going on in domestic violence. And this is the most common, most prevalent type, where you have the female initiated, you start with the nagging, you continue with minor violence, you move on to violence that would be viewed very openly as major if a guy was doing it. And then when the guy finally snaps, he's the only one whose fault is recognized in this scenario by law enforcement and, for the most part, the general public. This was bidirectional violence, and it would not have happened if it had not been started by the female involved. And I'm not saying that it's okay for him to hit. I'm saying it's not okay for her to throw things.
Yeah. No, she's definitely, it seems to me that she definitely initiated. The problem is that the camera is on him, so what people are seeing is his response, and because, if you look at the tweets, I'll put them on screen here, hold on.
Yeah.
People are all angry with this guy, like there's no excuse for this, right? Here's Emily Berkler Jensen, the horrible justifications of his actions, because there are some people saying, well, shit, she started it. I'm sick. Even if she was out of hand, it's no reason to do this. She was bugging him. Quote, he was tense. She started it. She was exaggerating. I know those screams. I felt her pain. People like this are why people aren't believed. This is like that Simpsons thing where the woman is like, your tears say more than any amount of evidence ever could.
Reread the last couple sentences of what she said.
I know those screams. I've felt her pain. People like this are
that's
why...
it right there.
Yeah.
She is an abuser too. I know those screams. I felt that pain. And she was describing what Grace Monday was doing. She was
Mhm.
describing Grace Monday's actions from the standpoint of being familiar. In other words, she viewed Monday as anticipating his response, and acted like that made Monday a victim because she anticipated his response. Well, she anticipated his response. That means that this is a regular thing with them.
Yeah.
And
So some more. I just wanted you guys, because this is the thing about this story. Okay, it's not much of a story, really. You have a person. This is like what happens when we live in an age where, you know, our media and our ability to like communicate, you know, through social media gives people a bit, what I think is a bit too much of an inside view of people's personal lives. And that's basically what happened here. Was this guy was doing some game streams, and this his girlfriend or wife, I mean, she shares his last name, so I don't know, maybe they're married, or maybe she just
The way I saw it was there's no marriage certificate anyone could pull up, but I guess the
Okay.
way it works in Australia is it's like if you have children with them and if you've been living together for over 2 years, you're basically, I guess, common law married.
Okay. So like his partner, right, the mother of his kids, she basically brings personal drama on his stream by arguing with him. And I'm not saying it's her fault necessarily, but we end up getting a glimpse into their, you know, their personal relationship, which is probably, you know, bi-directionally abusive, as Hannah was saying. Most of the time, people in abusive relationships, it's a two-way street. Like, they're both just messed up people that are getting involved with each other, and they have children. I mean, the woman, as I understand it, the woman was pregnant. This is another
Yes, she
defense
was
that
at the time.
another defense that people are using here is they're saying she was pregnant. How could you? And it's like, well, then why is she, like, you know, taking swings and throwing shit at this guy? Like, is it because she knows in her mind that there's no way he would retaliate on on me because he's live streaming and I'm pregnant, so I can just do whatever I want? Like, what's the
One thing that makes me quite suspicious is the line, "You're a fucking woman basher." Is that what she
yeah
said?
yeah? She said
And
you're
Basically what she
it's
yells, yes.
Yeah, it's not like he said you're a man basher when she started on him, but she went straight there.
yeah
Which suggests to me that well,
I'll tell you kind of almost what it feels like. It almost feels like she was putting on a bit of a show for the stream.
yeah. It was like a setup. That's what I'm saying. Like, and to say
the first
that
thing I thought of is this sounds like one of those anti-domestic violence ads, because the soundtrack makes it sound like he's entirely in the wrong. Because
Yeah.
all you hear is one sort of it's halfway between a slap and a punch. You don't know what's going on, but
It's a pretty meaty whack.
yeah. And then you hear the woman crying. So the picture paints itself because we've seen it painted so often in anti-domestic violence ads.
yeah, except in anti-domestic violence ads, most of the time they don't show the woman's behavior as blatantly as what she did.
And I'll tell
It's
you what they
usually
also don't
the,
show.
you know, completely innocent woman being, you know, set on by a controlling man.
They also don't show what happens a little bit later in this video. You just showed the main event, but she then comes back for more.
Yeah.
She then comes back
Yep.
to harangue him more and tries to get him to apologize. And he storms off again right after it seems like he's hit by something else that is thrown hard enough to at least jostle his webcam.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like if you think that first one was like going to be so horrific and horrible I mean, why would you come back for more of that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, again,
And this-
it really
again, this is
activates the almonds.
It's common. And it's the sad thing is this is common. This is what is seen in domestic violence victims advocacy, and a lot of times because they are coming from the standpoint of the Duluth model, they don't acknowledge that when women initiate violence, they are initiating. They will even refer to the act of initiating that violence as preemptive self-defense, because they know that you can only push a person so far before that person snaps and starts hitting back or defending themselves or engaging in the conflict. And And it doesn't make engaging in the conflict right, but
No.
it does make it understandable. And I hate to sound like, you know, well, basically, being being available for quote mining, but this is exactly why research shows that women assault more, women initiate more, but they also get injured worse in these conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
Because when guys get to that point where they do finally hit back, they're in an emotional state, a psychological state where they are not able to be gentle and careful the way a guy is when he restrains a violent woman. This is something that it really kind of shows the thing that feminists and MRAs argue about the most. The fact that, women are more violent, but men are more skilled at it, more capable.
Yeah.
And it to me, it says, this is women need to learn to be as in control of their emotions and their behavior as men are expected to be. Because a conflict like this would not start, and there would not have been violence from him if there had not been violence from her first. And as much as it's ingrained to just flat out condemn the violence from him, nobody should do that without condemning the violence from her. That's the situation. Nothing about how wrong what he did was excuses the wrong that she committed.
Yeah. They're just, like I said, they need help, and this shouldn't have been blasted on the internet. Like, they should be dealing with this. This is not going to be good for them in the long run, the fact that everyone's talking about it, and he's the one who gets arrested, and everybody white knights for her. And it's really annoying because it's like they cannot see that she is as much a part of this problem between them as he is. Like, this is, and it's not just women. Yes, there's a lot of women here that are saying, reading these replies makes me sick. People defending his actions, they probably beat women too. And this other one that says, also, for those of you who are arguing that she shouldn't have provoked him, that is something that victims of abuse hear/tell themselves to rationalize the abuse. It's still not okay what he did, even if she threw something. So, and look, this is the thing about domestic violence that I find that is the most annoying, okay? It's not just feminists that obviously live by the mantra that men are abusers and women are always victims. It's also traditionalists that believe that men should just put up with women's shit no matter what because it's the gentlemanly thing to do. And women are somehow, well, they are expected to act like a lady, but they are also forgiven if they're behaving irrationally, especially if certain conditions apply, like, oh, she's pregnant, oh, she's got kids, oh, she's like emotional, and that's just the way women are. So this sort of stuff goes no matter where you sit on the spectrum, and it's going to be places like here where we're going to say, no, she has to own her shit too. She is a part of this problem, right? This isn't just some guy beating his wife. That, like, it's like Bill Burr said, these things don't fall out of the sky, right? And this is not easy to talk about, because people will respond to it emotionally. They'll think, oh, so you think wife beating is okay? No, obviously not. We're against violence, period. But the thing is, when we see it, we know that it's like both parties are capable of it. We know that it can come from either. Just because women are physically weaker doesn't mean that they're not capable of hurting men. Seriously. And it doesn't happen. And we're just saying, yes, they can. And in this instance, this is what happened. And by the way, it's important to point out, these two likely have a long history of physical abuse. They probably do. That is like, they look young and they have a 3-year-old daughter. Okay? They're probably pretty dysfunctional already. So just think about that. There was violence from many sides. From many sides. All right, I got a couple of super chats, and then I'll let you guys, if you guys have any final thoughts on this story before we move on. Blave Kaiser gives us $5 and says, "You always got to love it when a woman can go completely off the rails, but once the guy hits her once, he is a woman batterer." Yeah, well, that's the way it works, right? You push and push and push and push and push until he finally responds, and if he does, then you get to say you're a wife beater. And then everybody goes along with it. They're like, "Yep, he sure is. He should have put up with it forever." Why? Hokey Bukisa gives us $2.
Worse than wife beater. Woman basher is worse than wife beater. It means if you hit me, it means you hit all women.
Oh,
which
okay,
is
yeah.
an ugly mindset to be going into, whoever you are, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, wife beater is pretty much just, well,
it's just your wife. Hokey Bukisa gives us $1.99, and he says, "Death to white knights." But he says death with just an E and not an EA, so I think he means Megadeth, like the band. That's cool.
Or maybe the word death like gets immediately like unmonetized now.
Oh yeah, probably. We don't want to give you don't want to give YouTube that money. The Spence Fencer gives us $2 and says, "We can't let this story go. We make it a new rally." Okay. And Hokey Bukisa gives us another $1.99, and he says, "Equal rights and lefts." Also, Bane is in the chat. He comes to these shows. Bane, if you're going to be a regular visitor, you should just come on and talk about the stories with us. I'm just saying. You don't have anything else to do. So, any other thoughts on the Fortnite story, or should we move on? Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. We'll see. I mean, the guy...
I was muted and I started to say something and it didn't come out. But
oh, okay.
No, this is something that really bugs me because a lot of women don't get this, especially like guys. A lot of guys that haven't been in this kind of relationship don't get it. But if they've faced another guy that's behaved this way, they can kind of see it. But if you get like a lot of women who, especially like women who are willing to engage in this behavior, and they seem to be shocked every time, like. Every time they get a reaction, even though it's kind of the reaction they were pushing for. But I mean, if you get up in somebody's face, if you poke at somebody in the chest, if you're throwing things at somebody and you're haranguing and you're yelling and you're backing them into a corner, or you're keeping them on the edge, or you're starting to get embarrassing, you're starting to get grouchy, you're starting to get somebody to the point where they're all riled up. And as they continue to get into that emotional state, and you're continuing to push them farther and farther, poke at them and prod at them, and boom! And that moment when you jump, right? That's a reflex. Now, not every moment when a guy hits back is a reflex. Guaranteed, getting up out of your seat and going into the other room gives you at least a little bit of time to think. But most women don't think about the fact that they hit that point where they get in somebody's face and they put somebody in a situation where they are being assailed. Whether it's having things thrown at you, whether it's being poked in the chest, whether it's being yelled at over and over again, whether it's being yelled at in front of people that you want to respect you. That just... sorry for everybody's ears. I know that I actually have a video where I did that and put a weird, scary image on the screen. And I've shown it to people, and a lot of them are like, I hadn't thought about it that way. But that's the thing. When you get somebody in that state, that emotional state, and you do that, and you trigger a reflex, women who have been victims of sexual violence talk about being triggered all the time. By things that remind them of the violence, or even, women who like to exploit the claim of being victims of sexual violence will talk about being triggered by everything. But that is being triggered. When you have your reflexes, when you have your instincts set off by something like that, the idea that a guy has 100%, always 100% control over that is unfair. And it's as unfair as the idea that he should never have to have control over that. It's just as bad to say that a woman should be able to engage in any type of abuse she wants, and a guy should never lose his shit because of the abuse that's being leveled at him, as it is to say that a guy could engage in any kind of abuse he wants, and a woman deserves no recourse because of the shit that's being leveled at her. And so that's my take on it.
Okay. I have one last thing that I just thought about this. What if she chose this time to harangue this guy while he was live? I know that he doesn't have a lot of subs, from what I heard. He doesn't have like a ton of people following him. It's not like it's his job. But if she didn't like the fact that he was playing this game online, and she wanted something from him, or she wanted to hurt him in some way, what if causing this situation was her plan? Because he's likely not going to be, he's probably going to lose all of his followers. He's going to be shamed off the internet. He's probably going to have to like lay low for a while before he like reemerges, and he's, what if that's like her way of abusing him? Because a lot of times, women will use proxies to damage men, and it may not always be physical. I mean, they often do that too. I've seen that where a woman wants to get a man hurt, so she cries, that she's abusing him or that she's doing something to him to get like other white knight men to come out and hurt men that she wants hurt on her behalf. But it could also be like a kind of social assassination, a social abuse. And I think that that's entirely possible. She could know what his buttons are, what buttons to press to get him to lash out, because they probably have had this happen between each other before. And then to do it online,
it seems more likely that she's just built up a resentment to this pursuit of his, and was because he spends more time with that than he does with her and the kids. And
or she wants a divorce, and she wants custody, and she wants support, and which now if he's fired, she's just screwed herself. But if she wants a divorce and she wants custody and she wants ownership of whatever common property they have, the quickest, easiest way for her to do it is to obtain proof that he abuses her, that he hits her. And
right, that's why she
says will give her everything
loud enough for everyone to hear that you're a woman basher as this is happening, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know exactly what it's for, but I just don't think this fell out of the sky. And there could be, there could be a reason for it. I mean, I think it's reasonable to suspect that that's possible, and that things.
As they say, don't put up to, don't explain with conspiracy what can be explained with incompetence.
Yeah, it could be either way. But honestly, I have seen, personally, women do that. I've seen women try to use false allegations instead of true allegations. I've seen women try to use false allegations to get custody and to get property division, and I've seen at least one do it successfully. In fact, she ran her ex out of town, literally. Her white knights, and she had a nice little army of white knights, would track him down wherever he was and beat the living daylights out of him. He was being assaulted, harassed, pushed out of his jobs. And the local police wouldn't do anything about anybody that assaulted him because they believed that the guys were assaulting a wife beater. This is a woman who, by the way, actually picked up a push lawnmower and threw it at his next wife, but he's the abuser, who never hit her. So I've seen that situation. I've seen the use of allegations of abuse. And I've also seen a woman come into court with a black eye and claim a guy did it that I was with the day he was supposed to have hit her, and I know he was at home. But somehow she materialized a black eye from his fist from a distance without ever being touched. And, if he had not had a witness at his location at that time, he would have been screwed because she had a black eye. Mm-hmm. So it's possible. It's not something that, like, we could speculate on it all day, but we don't know.
Sure.
But it is that does happen.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
As we say, always be recording.
Yeah.
And even that won't get you out of shit because the recording might look half finished.
All right, so I got a couple super chats, and then we'll move on to the next story. Maul Lurk gives us 20 Donkey Kong coins and says, how many did not hold the woman responsible? 70%? Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of tweets, but I think the majority of them were against the guy. Albert Nada gives us $10 Canadian and says, my grandfather used to say, you never hit a woman, a blind man, a drunk, or a fool. My grandmother used to say, if they're big enough to hit you, they're big enough to be hit. Hopefully in self-defense only, but
yeah, if you
ahead.
can leave, walk away. The minute you are in that situation, his best bet, the smartest thing he could have done would have been walk out of that house. Even if he'd have left it streaming, just leave the stream on and go out the door, get in your car and drive away. Lock the door to the room you're in if you can, and call somebody. Don't engage. If you get a woman start doing that stuff to you, and you know from past experience that she's going to escalate, like, block yourself off, lock yourself in, and call somebody, or get out, walk away, and don't try to go past her to get out, because I also know a situation, a local situation. The same woman who showed up with a black eye that was created from a distance.
From the Hadouken?
Yeah. Her second guy after my friend, he was in that situation where she had him trapped in an upper story room and was throwing things at him. And when he tried to get out by going past her, then he brushed up against her. And just that act got him 18 months. So
yeah,
like,
I definitely prefer if they're big enough to hit you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's a good idea to tell little boys that they shouldn't hit grown women. And if they're fucking being assaulted by them or sexually assaulted by them, then by all means, hit the bitch until you get away. Like, this is how the Myra Hindleys of the world get away with their shit for so long.
Yeah, unfortunately,
you get
right
shorter
now,
sentences than Ian Huntley. Yeah, never mind.
Unfortunately, right now, the situation is that if you defend yourself, you get treated as a perpetrator. If you can get out of it without having to defend yourself, without having to have any contact with her, get out. That's the best thing to do. And if this is happening in your relationship, get out of the relationship. You're not going to fix her. Yeah. Things aren't going to get better.
No, for sure. Hey, well, he's got a kid. He's got kids, though. See, that's tough. Mike J, I think someone named Ken Lee is saying, Short Fat Otaku, update, please. Is there maybe an update on this story that Short Fat Otaku is talking about, possibly?
I've got no idea. I haven't really looked at it since about maybe 7 or 8 a.m. today.
Okay.
I can check real quick.
Yeah, if you could, just see if there's anything. I don't know if it's related to this story or something else. Meanwhile, Hoki Bukisa gives us $4.99 and says, women do shit like this on purpose all the time. My sister-in-law threw a beer on my brother in a bar once because she wasn't getting enough attention. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, that's not unusual. It's just a matter of, like, how we aggress against each other. You know, I think generally men they do so physically, and generally women do so socially.
Yeah, the beer is better than the glass, because in nightclubs it's not just the beer, it's the glass in the face and the shards all over the place. You know. Yeah.
I got one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a woman and out there and one of your friends acts like this, and nags your husband, don't ignore it. We hear all the time how guys are responsible for other guys who are abusing. Well, nobody calls out abusive women, and somebody has to, because this kind of thing is frequent and regular, and when you see this stuff and you ignore it, and you don't say anything, it doesn't get addressed. And the guy can't go to marriage counseling because the marriage counselor is going to tell him it's his fault. He can't go to family most of the time because the family is going to tell him he's not doing something right or she wouldn't be acting that way. And getting out is hard if you have kids. But stepping up just enough to say, you know, you're being abusive to him. Think about what you're doing. Sometimes that's all it takes to get a woman thinking about her actions. And it's not wrong to expect women to call each other out on stuff like this. You don't have to white knight. You don't have to physically intervene and stuff like that. But don't be silent either.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to the next story. We're going to be talking about James Fields. Someone in the chat just said that he got murdered. I'm going to look that up while Mike J reads the story. So, Mike J, if you want to.
Saying James Fields was murdered?
Somebody's claiming that James Fields was murdered.
We got to stop listening to this chat.
This was in the chat. Like,
yeah, it was in the chat.
It's proved.
Yeah, I'm just checking, but someone is claiming that Natalie Portman is her name, so I'm starting to wonder if they're the real Natalie Portman. Also, guys, yeah, clam slam that like button or teabag it, whatever is appropriate. I don't want to assume anybody's gender here, so if you have any evidence, let me know. Otherwise, we're just going to go forward with the story as we have.
The only thing that
Biggie was murdered too, wasn't he?
Yeah.
The thing that I'm seeing is that, and this is semi late breaking. I think this was like 2 hours ago. He's currently sentenced to life in jail plus 419 years.
What?
Yes.
It's why do we even bother sentencing people for this long?
You want to know why? Because they
Making a
have
statement.
things like, well, there's that, but there's also parole and early release and all kinds of things that happen with even violent criminals. And so the judges hand down these extraordinarily long sentences because many criminals are only going to serve a percentage of their sentence.
Yeah.
But then if they say without possibility of parole and stuff like that, they shouldn't have to.
Did they not just why didn't they just give him 420 years? Is it because they were afraid he was going to make a joke out of it?
Yeah. The other thing that happens is if you have, they'll throw the book at you. So you commit a crime, but in the process of committing this one crime, you do a whole set of actions, one after another or in conjunction with each other, each one of which can constitute its own crime. So then they try you for all of those crimes, and they sentence you individually for each of those crimes, and the sentences are not concurrent. They're one after the other. So then you end up with this maybe the 419 years might partly be due to the fact that he drove away and all that other stuff that they could have charged him with. Because I haven't looked at the stories that explain the charges he faced besides the obvious one, but that's another possibility as to why that stuff happens.
Yeah. Okay, Mike. Sorry. You can go ahead and read the story now. So,
I got to start off by saying this is an incredibly difficult story to find hard facts on. It's being really mainly distorted by two groups, and I don't think these groups are going to come to a surprise to anyone. You've got the media, which is basically enforcing the very hard left narrative that this guy was a Nazi psycho mass murderer who just wanted to kill people. And then you've got sort of the extreme right saying he was a good boy, he didn't do nothing, there was no crime committed here. And unfortunately, I can see a bit of truth in each side, and it's almost impossible, though, to find out where the middle ground is, where the truth is in this, and that's what makes it such a pain in the ass to talk about.
It wasn't a heart attack like that crowd is saying.
No.
It was actually related to the car.
Yeah,
but it looks like he may have been fleeing a scene in some way. So if anything, it was manslaughter. I think that's as much as I can make from the, as you said, very small amount of hard facts we've got.
Yeah.
So I'll just go ahead and read it. On Friday, December 7th, 2018, James Alex Fields Jr. was found guilty of murder in the first degree. Fields, who had been labeled a white supremacist by most mainstream media, was convicted of the 2017 death of Heather Heyer and the injuring of a dozen others as Fields drove his car through a group of counter-protesters. And I'm going to pause that really quickly and say, definitively, yes, Heather Heyer did die as a result of being struck by the car. You can read the 11-page autopsy report that is going to be linked to this article, and it makes no bones about it. Essentially, there was a blunt impact on her chest. Her ribs broke apart and basically butchered her insides, causing, I believe, her aorta to pretty much become a leaking pipe. And she bled out internally. She really had no chance of surviving. It was not a heart attack, as some people will try to tell you. If you even hear the word heart attack associated to this, someone is trying to feed you a line. Someone is trying to pump you full of propaganda. Continuing, the prosecution argued Fields was, quote, given a hard time by counter-protesters earlier that day, which is what caused him to drive through the crowd. The defense argued that Fields was, quote, in fear of serious bodily injury or death, and that his actions were purely in self-defense. Further, the defense noted that Fields suffered from ADHD, depression, anxiety, and was bipolar. I added at the end, Fields faces up to life in prison, although, like I said, as of now, he has been sentenced to life in prison plus 419 years.
Okay. Well, so yeah, there it is. It's in black and white. I heard the heart attack argument. I wasn't sure if it was true. I was also curious about something else. So look, I just want to say this right now. I'm not going to try to make a defense. I'm not defending the people on either side of this, you know, like the truth about this argument, because I think that the issue that's actually working itself out with what's happening here with, let's say, the identitarian right and the identitarian left, even though I don't like those descriptors, I don't think they're very good, it is really ultimately a problem with men that are they're looking for something, some responsibility, something to attach themselves to. And I think that the Unite the Right rally that happened in Charlottesville, that was completely licensed and legal and was supposed to be there, and then Antifa coming along just sort of like to stop them, that I think agitated the situation. I don't believe that Mr. Fields came to the rally to kill anyone, because there wasn't supposed to be any counter-protesters there. So this isn't about which side is right or wrong. I'm just looking at the facts of the case, right? And yeah, the heart attack thing is bullshit. So, but here's something I'm wondering about. If he drove into a crowd, is Heather Heyer the only one that was killed? Were there injured?
Yes, he was the only one killed, but
there were injuries as well.
There were also a number of people injured. Like I said, there was at least a dozen people injured, and I'm sure that's where some of the other charges stem from. But she was the only fatality in this case.
All right. Okay.
And this is, you know, the heart attack argument is actually really stupid, because if somebody hits you with a car and then you have a heart attack, you could pretty well be sure that the trauma of the accident can be attributed as a cause of the heart attack. Even if you had underlying condition, if you were not having a heart attack and then you got hit by a car and you had a heart attack, something, you know, set you off. So that still wouldn't be an excuse, even if there were doubt as to whether or not that was false.
It's like this snake bite isn't deadly. It's just the heart attack you get 20 minutes later that's deadly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that was a really lame attempt on their part. I haven't been hit directly by a car, but I've been in cars that have been hit by cars too often. And I calling it a heart attack doesn't fly. Even if it were a heart attack, this would still be attributable to him. You know, and the other thing is, I'm seeing in the chat, there's differing stories on what happened right before this. The story had come out that his car had been attacked and battered by protesters with him in it, and that he was fleeing in panic.
Yes,
and
we
then
have video, and we have
Then there's-
still pictures of
there's
people
also-
beating his car with sticks and poles.
There's also folks saying that he had gotten away from that, and that he sat at an intersection for 7 minutes and watched these protesters before driving into them at 70 miles an hour. So it's
No. That whoever just said 70 miles an hour is telling you an outright lie. The court records clearly did state he was not doing anything more than 30, which is another thing to state. If you were trying to kill people, why would you go less than 30 miles an hour? Wouldn't you want to speed up as much as humanly possible?
Most people might not realize this, but if you got hit by a car at 25 miles an hour, it could kill you.
Yes, I'm not trying to say it's any less than anything, but
maybe 30 is just as much as he was able to accelerate to in that short space.
He had a pretty good takeoff, and you could. The other thing the defense or the prosecution tried to say is he was sitting there revving his engine and going back and forth, which is, as far as I was able to tell, not able to be proven, but it seemed like he had a decent takeoff point.
Yeah, so it may be that the witnesses were able to describe things for the prosecution that perhaps didn't happen on camera. It doesn't necessarily. If it was witnesses from the crowd she was with, it's hard to say whether they were being truthful or not, especially if we don't have video of that. But that may be what they were relying on then. And it's as far as this goes, there's no argument for calling him innocent in this. And when you're behind the wheel of a car, you're behind the wheel of a car. You're controlling like 1,000 pounds of metal and glass. You're responsible for your actions, and panicking and hitting a group of people with your car is inexcusable. Even if a group of people are hitting your car, if they're you're not in a zombie movie, you're at a rally, and that you can drive out of there without going that fast, and you really don't have to plow through people.
Part of the problem, from what I heard, again, I take this with a grain of salt. I've been trying to pull this from all over the place and haven't exactly had all the time in the world to verify all of this. But I believe part of the court records also stated that he was trying to find his way out. He was not a native to the area. He was trying to get back to Ohio, which is on the other side of the U.S. And at the time, Antifa had been moving around the road closed signs. And I believe part of the evidence that was logged in was he was typing into Google Maps how to get home, and it wasn't giving him a very clear route because of all the protests, and he didn't plan to actually encounter them. It's just something that happened because of poor directions.
Well, that's great, but you still keep going. I mean, and this is you don't have to drive that fast through an area. If you got people in the street in front of you, driving that fast is you just can't. There's no excuse for that. I can't rightfully excuse it, and I hate to say this, but no amount of panic excuses that. And I'm sympathetic to a situation, and I understand that he probably regrets his actions and everything, but at the very least, this would be something that you'd be considered very negligent in doing, even if it wasn't a planned, premeditated act. And my sympathy is really limited by that.
That's the thing that I'm never going to understand is how they got first degree on this, because that's premeditated.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably a consequence of a lot of the spin. It's probably had an effect on the judge's ruling. I mean, generally, people in the U.S. that know about the events of Charlottesville, they are all working from the mainstream media narrative that this was a white supremacist that was trying to kill people and succeeded in killing. I think that's and that's probably why he got first degree murder. But I guess the one thing I wanted to say about this is, and then I think we should move on, is I absolutely agree that, the guy was responsible for the events that happened. I don't think first degree is what he should have gotten, but this is the way things go. And I think that this is like the result of, you know, again, the amount of just the amount of the saturation around the idea that this was a white supremacist, white nationalist rally that was there specifically to marginalize people, and it shouldn't have been there, and the Antifa showed up and they were the heroes and they were there to stop them, even though technically if Antifa had not shown up, then the Unite the Right rally would have done their thing with their tiki torches and everyone would have went home and nothing would have happened. But because they went there, I think it created a situation where someone ended up getting killed, and it was a needless thing that didn't have to happen, but this is just because of all the chaos. But what I'm thinking about in terms of this, because I'm trying to look at this from a men's issues perspective, and I don't have much of an interest in the identitarian nationalist angle, because I don't think that on the surface it's very relevant. But when I look at what happened, I think this is a tragedy that could have been avoided if this conversation, the thing is, the reason why we have an alt-right and the reason why there is an Antifa in both cases has a lot to do with men that need, they're not getting the compassion that they need, and they're not given the direction that they need. And so they're looking for something to belong to. They're looking for a sense of purpose, and that's what they find. And that's one of the reasons why, and I'm going to have to give Jordan B. Peterson credit for this, Jordan Peterson has driven more men away from identitarian movements by talking to them about personal, individual responsibility, right, than anyone in the media has, than any of the people that are the typical talking heads on this sort of thing. And one of the main reasons why these things aren't being addressed in that regard is because they don't see Antifa as a group of men that are looking for something to belong to. They don't see that by any means necessary in Antifa and Black Lives Matter and these other like radical communist left-wing organizations are ultimately feminist groups that are looking to use men as foot soldiers and meat shields to push forward whatever their political agenda is. Meanwhile, the alt-right does the same thing with the same men. They're just basically saying, well, look, we're going to look out for you. We care about you. We're going to use you too, right? And all it is men that are like, you know, they're in need of compassion, direction, and purpose. And this is where they end up going if they don't find something that will essentially like nurture the parts of them, encourage the parts of them that will make them great men. And that is, I think, unfortunate, not only because Heather Heyer died and she didn't have to, but also because James Fields is going to serve nearly 420 years in prison. I mean, probably less than that, because of what happened. It's like something that didn't have to happen. And I think it's because we're not taking care of our men and boys. This is what's going to happen, and it's going to be on all sides. So, and in this situation, we see scapegoating. I mean, what happened with Fields? What he did was a wrong response, and there, regardless of what the punishment was, he was still going to end up. He's liable for what he did. Just as an adult, I can't let a person off the hook for driving into a crowd of people. And it's not under the circumstances described anyway. Even the worst of the circumstances described, and killing someone. But I don't think he deserved to be accused of premeditating it and doing it deliberately for the purpose of causing them bodily harm. I think he was negligent, and I think they've scapegoated him and attempted to use his panicked actions as a means of demonizing the men on the other side. And of course they're going to be used as a toxic masculinity narrative and all that. They win no matter what. If there's men, like on the right and left are beating each other up, killing each other, assaulting each other, feminists get to say it's toxic masculinity. If it gets first degree murder, then they can attribute it to ideological beliefs or something, because they tend to go hand in hand with premeditated behavior. Oh yeah, and such. And so now they can say officially the alt-right is responsible for one death. Yep, because the alt-right is responsible for this man's actions. Therefore, haha. But that's not even the case.
It's his stupid reactions.
It is.
Yeah.
And they're gonna ride, but they are gonna ride this wave. You guys will look out. There's gonna be tons and tons of viral videos and talking heads in the media and academics that are gonna use this conviction to continue to push the narrative, both of the dangers of the right wing in general, not just the far right, and also the dangers of men in general, and also the dangers of white people in general. It's going to be everything they can use. All of this guy's general traits are going to become deadly weapons of propaganda. So, and that's coming. That's for sure. But anyway, let's move on to the next story and tell us what your thoughts are on the James Field thing. Do you think that this is a simply what it is, what people are saying it is, or do you think that this is a problem with masculinity that is never going to be addressed by people who are like touting the toxic masculinity narrative and believe that there is something wrong with men, therefore they need to fix them? Because I will bet you this guy who's got all these problems, I will bet you that he's either been raised by a single mother or he's got issues with his dad.
Oh, he was.
Alienation
He
of
was
some.
He was raised
by a
single
single
mother.
mom. See, there you go. I knew it. And he was essentially attended public school and basically went through all of the usual bullshit. So,
And all 4 of his diagnoses are things that get medicated. 3 of them are frequently treated with the specific type of medication that has been present in the majority, if not all, of the school shootings that have made the news in the last 20 years or so. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
It's almost
So
like
it
an
would be
argument could be
interesting-
made that stuff makes you make bad decisions.
Well, yeah, they put me on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors when the steroids they had me on for my asthma made me nuts. And I mean, this was roid rage. But they put me on SSRIs, and what I found with those is they do not eliminate the thing that they're being prescribed to eliminate. They eliminate the anxiety that you might have over the consequences of reacting to it. So if you're suicidal and you take SSRIs, there's a big risk that you'll stop being afraid to kill yourself, and you won't stop wanting to. And if you have other destructive tendencies or self-destructive tendencies, bad impulses that are going to get you in trouble, and you start taking SSRIs, you may only lose your anxiety over the potential consequences of choosing to give in to those impulses, and not the actual impulses, the intrusive thoughts, the emotional fallout, and all of that. So it kind of makes you feel zombified, and it doesn't cause you to make bad decisions. It causes you to feel less worried about what's going to happen because you made bad decisions. So like this idea that SSRIs makes people suicidal and makes people dangerous and everything it's half the picture.
yeah, definitely. Although, just to be fair, well, it was the defense that said that he had all these issues, but I mean, they likely had to back it up in some way. So he probably was diagnosed for all those things and was on pills. So not just a single mom. And again, I'm sensing a pattern. I don't want to presume anything, but I'm sensing a pattern with guys that are raised by single mothers. I'm just saying. All right. So moving on. So we're going to go to the next story. This is, well, it's probably the big one that everyone's been waiting for. So in the summer of 2017, Patreon banned Lauren Southern from their platform, stating she was raising funds to take part in activities likely to cause loss of life. Patreon did not cite evidence of their determination of this likelihood, but Southern assumed it was in response to a Defend Europe mission, which potentially involved joining the group on a boat to uncover the NGOs who had been moving thousands of illegal migrants to Europe under the cover of humanitarian rescue operations and their collusion with criminal traffickers. The money from Patreon was not going to Defend Europe, and Lauren Southern did not participate in the mission. even as a journalist. Defend Europe is an identitarian group, and many were able to dismiss her ban with their disavowal of the group. However, what we should all watch is Patreon's insistence. The ban was not from an ideological bias, but it was based on a, quote, manifest observable behavior. By the way, the observable behavior in the case of Southern was a video of her firing a flare gun over a ship. Last week, Patreon doled out some more bans. Milo Yiannopoulos was banned from using its platform to fund a magnificent 2019 comeback because of his past association with the Proud Boys. Sargon of Akkad and James Alsop were hit with bans as well. When Sargon of Akkad reached out in response to finding his Patreon removed, he was told he violated community guidelines by using racial and homophobic slurs in a conversation shared online. The specific conversation was not on his own YouTube channel, nor was it shared on his Patreon, which should not have violated Patreon's community guidelines. In Mashable's coverage of the bans, author Raymond Wong calls Sargon a, quote, British conspiracy theorist, alt-right content creator, and a scumbag human, not garbage human, that's been trademarked, and complains that Facebook has not done enough to, quote, purge fake news and racist commentary by banning Milo there as well. Wong believes online platforms should take a greater responsibility to ban problematic figures to stop them from spreading malicious, incorrect, and defamatory information. Ironic. It's becoming more and more clear that this has less to do with manifest observable behavior and more to do with the other mob. The mob of the power-hungry and ideologically possessed, taking a stand by ending the discussion. Razorfist made a very somber video where he quoted Stefan Molyneux. This is Steph's quote. Quote, history is quite clear on this. When conversations end, battles begin. So I actually have said this too, where, you know, if you take away speech, all that people seem to have left is violence. And we don't want that, right? So this is the Patreon story. You see that it's like a larger pattern of activity that's been going on for a while now, and it's not limited to Patreon. Also, remember, we did a story on this last week. Lindsay and I did the story of the guy, I forget his name, the CEO of Apple, when he was basically saying that taking people's platforms away because they speak hatred is the right thing to do, and that our moral judgment is... what did he say? It's like basically our greatest gift as human beings and the one that we should use. And so, and of course, he also claimed that there is no collusion that goes on. It was Tim Cook, thank you. That there was no collusion that goes on between all the companies in Silicon Valley. Yet, it doesn't look good. So,
and then he gave the example of we never allow white supremacist music over at the Apple App Store. And like, yeah, music's not the same as like political speech, is it? It's very difficult to pin someone down on what they really mean by their lyrics. But when it comes to, you know, talking about name
one or two bands,
yeah, only
but
one
I
or two.
highly doubt.
But wait, yeah, it's you know, it's much more
but what about
cut and dry when it comes to just people who talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but what if there's a song that has anti-white speech in it? From like black rappers? What if it's stuff that's like, you know, like I was talking about this before. What if it's like rap music that objectifies women according to their standards? You know, calling them hoes and bitches and stuff. Like, you know, like, I mean, there's any number of things that, like, if Tim Cook applied his standards universally, there'd be tons of music that would be removed. It would just be from artists that he probably doesn't want to ban, right? So I don't even like that he makes that argument about, well, we do that we don't like allow white supremacist music on our platform. I was like, okay, what about, you know, stuff that's...
What about Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, music has been
Darling of the alt-right.
Music has been political since the Vietnam War and the hippie counterculture. Actually, it was kind of the folk music that existed before that was kind of political too. There was sort of the genesis, I guess you could say, of the American answer to gypsies, the sort of move around and live your life independently of the rest of society crowd. Like, music has been political forever, in some ways, and that might have been the last bastion of communication if they weren't already banning it. If they weren't already banning music that they consider to be political in the wrong way. So, yeah, this is really disgusting.
Yeah.
And it's, I've already written to, I have a Patreon, and I haven't used it since I think before this last ICMI, because I've been busy with Honey Badger stuff. So I don't know when I'm going to use it again, but I've asked my patrons to just switch over and support Feed the Badger instead, because partly because of that, and partly because if I ever start doing things again, I don't want a dime to go to Patreon from me, and I'm gonna delete mine on Monday. And I just want to make, I wanted to give them time for the message to get to everybody, and then that's it. It's gone. This is terrible, and I don't think people realize we're seeing this shut down everywhere. You're seeing, like, Gab can't fund itself without post office box at this point. Gab can't get funds through any kind of electronic transfer right now. They've been pretty much entirely cut off, and for something that is everywhere. We keep hearing about the anti-Semitic speech on Gab. Twitter is rife with it. It is very prominent, very prevalent. There's like 3 times as much on Twitter as there is on Gab. But Gab gets targeted.
3 times as much what?
Anti-Semitic speech on Twitter.
Oh, well, it depends on where it's coming from. I believe that the Saudi...
Louis Farrakhan doesn't count.
Yeah.
Saudi Caliphate has more followers than we do, so...
Yeah, Muslim attacks on the Jewish faith, verbal attacks on the Jewish faith, are allowed. I recognize that they're politically correct. Right?
Twitter's not going to be. They don't want to be bigots. Right? I mean, yeah, like, come on now. They're just discussing the future Palestine, Hannah.
So of course it's only if white people, or if you say it the way I've seen it spelled on Twitter, why people.
Why people?
Oh yeah, they do that to get around.
Why people.
They do that to get around the word filters.
Yeah. Well, so white people are not allowed to be anti-Semitic, but Muslims are, even though there's actually an awful lot of Muslims who are white. And you see the same thing on Facebook. There's quite a bit of anti-Semitic speech on Facebook. There was anti-Semitic speech on Google+. It's on YouTube. There's video after video after video of the Jew conspiracy theory on YouTube. It's crazy. But Gab got targeted. Why did Gab get targeted? It's not because they don't censor anti-Semitic speech. It's because they don't censor anti-social justice warrior speech. And this is the same thing. I'm betting dimes to dollars that Patreon has caved to the mob because they know the mob can get MasterCard to cut them off, and the mob can get Visa to cut them off. The mob can get banks directly to cut them off. So this is the dollar for them. They don't do any other kind of, they're not like Minds. Minds has their setup with cryptocurrency, and it seems to be working pretty well. But Patreon doesn't have anything like that. And it seems like they're pushing and pushing and pushing, and they're eventually going to get to a point where probably about the worst possible thing is going to end up happening. In either it's going to be that slip into violence, like Stephen Molyneux has talked about, or it's going to be one side of the political spectrum gets cheesed off enough gets enough people into political power, and our federal government starts regulating these platforms, which would also be terrible because the federal government's involvement never makes things better. So, and they're going to get what they asked for. They're going to get told what people can and can't say on these platforms, and they're going to be told who the platforms can and can't ban, and they're not going to like it. The only people that are going to like it are the people that are getting rich running these platforms without having to deal with competition. So everybody's going to lose out, except, you know, the Jack Dorseys and the Zuckerbergs and the Saudi prince that owns a lot of stock in Twitter. And
he owns
so on.
more stock in Twitter than Jack Dorsey does.
Yeah. So that's going to be the end result.
Twitter is owned by Islam. Yeah.
And the only thing that we can do about it as users is walk away. The only thing we can do is say, all right, well, we're not going to use your payment platforms. We'll come up with our own, which will eventually be targeted too.
Yeah.
So you might as well hang around in whatever platforms you're still able to hang around on and fight the good fight while you're still there. Because no matter where you go, you're still going to have to fight that fight.
Alison is like working out an alternative, but currently we're using Feed the Badger. So just go to Feed the Badger if you want to support us. We have to try to create our own thing because we can't trust Patreon. And she has suspicions about that new thing. What is it called that everyone's gone to?
Subscribe Star, it's called.
Subscribe Star, yeah.
I don't want to get burned like we did with Maker Support, so I want to wait until I've heard some success stories, some reliable success stories. Like, yes, I definitely got paid from this site. So yeah, because I didn't lose anything from Maker Support. I just signed up, and loads of people pledged, and they lost money. And I definitely don't want to do that again to people. You know.
One other thing,
I'm going to wait a few weeks until I know for sure that Subscribe Star is good, because apparently they invited Sargon like personally to come onto the platform, but that doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that they're not just out to fucking swindle everyone. You know?
Yeah, no, for sure. One other thing I wanted to say about this. So this is not just happening on Patreon, obviously. This is going on all over. And you guys may have heard about Gavin McInnes, who has been removed from several platforms, including
he got the Alex Jones treatment.
Yeah, he's been removed from, and also CRTV. Now, there's a lot of speculation about why. Like, one thing I heard was that because The Blaze joined up with CRTV, what's his name? The guy who runs Glenn Beck made some ultimatum like he wouldn't do it if Gavin was there. But that's all speculative. So here's the thing that I heard. So Tim Pool did his thing about Gavin. And I think this is important because Gavin's group, so this sort of puts us within a few degrees of Gavin McInnes. So Gavin's group, the Proud Boys, at least the one he founded, they are being seen as the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, as well as, I believe, the Southern Poverty Law Center as a male supremacist group. And they lump in other male supremacist groups, such as A Voice for Men, into the same camp, even though we have never had any dealings with the Proud Boys. Now, you guys might... the Proud Boys, as far as I know, not a hate group. As far as I know, they basically protect people from Antifa at public gatherings, and they are Western chauvinists, and they have a general care for masculinity, but it's sort of like in a TradCon way. Okay,
they're not a male supremacist group.
No, they're not. But they're basically just like, you know, like I said, they're kind of TradCon-y, pro masculinity, pro men being men kind of a group of dudes.
They're slightly conservative frat boys. That's all they are.
Yeah, that's it. They're just frat boys. And
it's not even like they give a shit about feminists. Like Antifa is their main target, which would suggest that like their main truck is with left-right shit. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I would guarantee you that if you asked them how they felt about, you know, the suffragettes and like first wave or second wave feminism, they'd probably be all for it. They're not really anything to worry about, like in terms of them being extremists in any way. However, Gavin was removed from all platforms, and his removal from YouTube specifically was supposedly due to copyright strikes that he got, and he got enough of them that his channel was taken down. Now, word is that the channel was the copyright strikes actually came from the company he worked for, CRTV, because I think it was CRTV, but it might have been a different company, because he was sharing videos that he made while he was with the company on his channel, which I guess because he made them with the company, they technically were their videos, even though Gavin made them, and they basically had enough to strike him down. Now, where the bad take comes in is that Tim Pool then followed up by saying that Gavin had this one video that was put together by this guy who worked for the Young Turks, whose name I can't remember. He put together some supercut of Gavin saying supposedly a bunch of really hateful things that incited violence, and that was justification to get him removed, which doesn't make sense because YouTube's reasoning was that he was taken down because of copyright strikes, not because he was inciting violence. So I'm just saying, don't muddy the waters with this, because Gavin is, even though he's never spoken to us before, I think that in the minds and in the eyes of the mainstream media, as well as people who consume media, we are very close to the Proud Boys, even though we're really not. We'd probably disagree with them on a lot of shit. But I think with that, we have to make this distinction. We have to understand what they're about and how they're, how in what ways they're right and what ways they're wrong. And yeah, it's just, and this is like how people get taken down that are, for really bad reasons. I mean, Sargon his content is very, very middle of the road, straightforward, common sense stuff. But they're calling him an alt-right conspiracy theorist. And who did they do this to first? They did it to Alex Jones. What did they say? They said he was a conspiracy theorist and he was an alt-righter. And so they're going to keep using this excuse to take down more and more people. When they did it to Lauren Southern, I thought that they was overreach, even though one could make the argument that maybe she was, in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the optics aren't good or whatever. But I would not have
kind of feel
supported
like Tim Cook sort of stood up there and said, hey, we've never allowed Nazi punk bands, so you guys do something. And Jack Conte was listening, and he thought, right, I'm going to make a stand as well. I'll get rid of who's the next most popular? Sargon of Akkad. I'll get rid of him. Oh, everyone's going to love me now.
Yeah.
Oh, Jack, you keep fucking up like this. And he's probably going to, apologize for this in a week, just like he did last time, and just go back to normal. Oh.
Nah, maybe. I don't know. But, yeah, so, this is... They're just going to keep doing this, I think that this is showing that if we don't, make our own thing... Because, look, these people, they do have an ideological bias, and it does get in the way of their judgment. This, manifest observable behavior, that's not what was happening. That's why is he even bringing that up? That didn't even apply in Sargon's case. And I don't think it applied in James Alsop's case, even though I haven't seen... James hasn't made a statement on this yet, so I don't know, what the reasoning is behind his thing, as well as the cartoonist whose name I can't remember that was also taken down because what? Because he makes conservative comics? There's no call for violence there, as far as we know. So, anyway, tell us what you guys think about this. Go ahead.
There's a consistent pattern here, too. Sargon's speech that they banned him for was not related to Patreon. It didn't have anything to do with his Patreon. It didn't have anything to do with his channel. He wasn't paid for it. It was a
podcast.
Twitter had come out, I think it was last year, that they said they were going to be doing this. They were going to be monitoring your speech on other areas of the internet. What you said on Facebook, what you said on Google Plus, if you had a blog, things like that. And if they didn't like what you said
and by the way,
Twitter,
they didn't have to. They didn't have to monitor all of Sargon's streams he did on other channels in order to find that clip.
No.
That clip was mirrored by dozens of different fucking woke hipster channels when he first said it. They were all going, "Oh look, look, he said nigger. Oh, we're gonna fuck him up now." And you did, guys. Well done. You fucking died your own death, but from the grave you managed to kill Sargon's patron. Well done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is becoming a more widespread thing. In fact, when we were kicked out of the Calgary Expo. It was not for things that we did necessarily at the Calgary Expo. It was for the associations outside of the Calgary Expo. And the things that were brought up in court were accusations regarding things that we had said outside of the Calgary Expo. And that was, at least at the lowest level, upheld. Which we're not done with that, but we'll see. But in any case, this is becoming a pattern of businesses deciding that you can't do business with them, whether it's a free business, this free service that they offer people in exchange. It's not really free, in exchange for your personal information. Facebook and Twitter and those sites all harvest a significant amount of your personal information. And once you've started using the site, they've got it. So if they don't continue to provide you the service, then they have gotten your information for free. But they're basically policing your speech. And the idea, they've actually come out and said, Twitter's actually been really blatant about it, come out and said, well, we can do this and it'll change people's behavior. That they feel entitled to control not just your speech on their platform, but all over the internet. So this is what we're looking at. And if we don't push back against it, we are going to end up in that situation where wrongthink is people are afraid to express it, and people are willing to turn other people in to get in good with these sites so that they don't get kicked off. And eventually the only way that people who express wrongthink will have to make their ideas heard is to take it to the streets. And the other option is they're going to end up with a political backlash and government regulation. Those are the two paths that I see this taking, and neither one of them is good.
Yeah. Okay, I got a couple super chats, and then we'll move on to the last story. So, Exploding Prinny at work gives us $5 and says, Patreon is the donation box of the Church of Intersectionality. Well, that's good, dude. I like that. Zeranx gives us $5 and says, what bothers me so much of Tim Pool's coverage is that he's too cowardly to actually show the context for what Gavin said and expects us to trust him. Actually, Nick Monroe, I believe, did a whole breakdown of that of those videos, those clips, and said that most of them were just jokes he was making because you know how Gavin is. He says things specifically to instigate people, right? He's just being funny. I don't know that he means it, but Nick Monroe talks about it, and most of it is pretty harmless. And yeah, and remember, I said this years ago, like before the election, even, with this rise in the quote alt-right unquote, they wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for progressives. So if you want to direct if you want to think about how this started, you need to look there first. Okay, and this doesn't excuse anything, but we have this is happening as a response to something this poison that was growing for as long as it has been. This both sides are bad thing is not a good take. I saw Chris Ray-Gun making that case earlier in the week, and it pissed me off because I'm like, dude, there's a big difference. So, all right, so let's move on to...
Yeah, they used to be able to just call people right-wing, and that was a good enough insult. Back when they thought that they could get away with calling themselves the underdog.
Yeah.
But now we've reached a point where it's so obvious that the left has won most of the battles between them and the right that they can't just get away with calling people right anymore because they know they're in the majority. So they have to invent a new kind of right called the alt-right, and they can get away with saying, we're victims of the alt-right. We're vulnerable to the alt-right because we don't know what they're going to do.
Yes. All right. So last story. The Hartford Courant, it's basically a newspaper that's like exclusive to Hartford, obtained 1,000 pages of documents from the Connecticut State Police revealing the Sandy Hook shooter Adam Lanza. Yeah, we're gonna go back a little bit, but I thought that this was an interesting story. So the Adam Lanza's loneliness and scorn for the world. According to the e-newspaper article, the documents revealed Lanza had an interest in pedophilia along with an obsession with mass murder. The 20-year-old had shot, quote, his mother 4 times as she slept and then killed 20 first graders and 6 educators before killing himself at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut on December 14th, 2012, end quote. Lanza was diagnosed as a child with sensory disorder and delays in speech. Initial diagnoses included OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, sensory integration deficit, and autism spectrum disorder. His writings express an intense aversion to things like food mixing on his plate and the feel of a metal door handle, as well as germophobia. They also tell of a disdain for relationships, an intolerance of his peers, a chilling contempt for anyone carrying a few extra pounds, and a conviction that certain aspects of living are worse than death. Psychiatrist Robert King met with 14-year-old Lanza, reporting, quote, increasing social withdrawal and reclusiveness. Lanza attempted to control his own experiences and slight deviations from routine attempted to control his own experiences and slight deviations from routine enraged and for routine. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a bit weird. Well, let's just say from the routine. Okay. In an example,
There's a comma left out. I see what that is.
Yeah.
He attempted to control his own experiences and slight deviations from routine enraged and paralyzed him.
Okay. From the routine or from his
Yeah.
routine. Okay.
So he was pattern oriented, which is something that can happen with autism. Yeah, like
Okay.
if it breaks the pattern, it's upsetting.
It's okay. In an example, the newspaper uses his writing titled Problems, where he lists seemingly petty things like the lights being too bright or his hair touching his brother's towel. I am unable to distinguish between my problems because I have too many, he wrote. Psychiatrist King noted Lanza was intolerant if his mother brushes by his chair, and he became upset when his mother leaned on something or if she walked too loudly. As cited by the Hartford Courant, I incessantly have nothing other than scorn for humanity, he wrote in what appears to be an online communication with a fellow gamer. I have been desperate to feel anything positive for someone for my entire life. Most of my social contact was through those players, he wrote to the fellow gamer. All of them are typical, detestable human beings, and it bred an aura of innumerable negative emotions for me. You were a respite from that. I am capable of boundless affection. I had never been in a situation to feel that way before, so I thought that it was special. I took my focus away from myself and redirected it towards you. Also included in the documents released was a 52-page book Lanza wrote and illustrated in the 5th grade that depicts violence and murder towards children. Investigators from the Child Advocate's Office in their report pointed to this book as a giant missed opportunity to find out why Lanza was so easily able to conceptualize violent acts and draw them out in his stories until blood was shed. So, I'm not a psychologist, but I thought it would be good to get a look at what these people had discovered about this guy, and he seemed like a kid with a lot of problems. And I think that
not every kid who writes weird stories about kids getting murdered. By the way, kids writing about kids getting murdered is just other people getting murdered. It's no more of a heinous crime than an adult killing adult if it's in the mind of another child and whatnot. But yeah, I was definitely one of those kids who drew pictures of violent murders all the time. Like when I was bored in math class and shit. There are many of us, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do that too.
Nightmares.
I used to draw
My
alien
brother had
invasions
comics
and
like
ninja
that.
fights and stuff.
Yeah. My brother used to draw comics like that all the time. It's a kind of a normal little boy thing to visualize fights and draw them or write stories about them and everything.
Need I remind you of cave paintings, eh?
Yeah. Well, my brother grew up to end up. He's actually, there's one young lady in our hometown that every time she sees my mom, she hugs her because my brother saved her life when she was in a car accident. So like he and another fella pulled a couple people out of that car. And yeah, it's not abnormal, but to write a 52-page book in the 5th grade indicates a high degree of intelligence. And sometimes you investigate further with a kid, and that's not wrong either. I had a teacher freak out over one of my stories when I was in the 8th grade. Actually, she freaked out over a couple of things and sent me to the guidance office, and I talked to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor sent a note back that I was fine and I wasn't going to be a threat to anybody. Because I wrote horror stories, but I was also reading horror stories. It was my favorite genre at the time. And I was reading the classic horror stories, so I had all kinds of weird monsters and strange scenarios and stuff like that. And it's not something that you can look at and say, well, this directly correlates to that there and therefore cause, right? But it is something that it's not wrong for adults to look at the combination of things going on with a child, particularly if the mother is asking for help, and in this case she was, and was denied. So there is a giant missed opportunity here. And in his case, he should have had help, and his mother should have had help with him, and that help was not given. And that help was withheld, and was denied. But I wouldn't say that the book itself, by any means, would necessarily justify.
No, but I mean, if they found
all
that
of these things combined do, like
Yeah, well-
especially the writings about his. Like the writing titled "Problems" is a lot more insight, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was gonna say if they're trying to suggest that book he wrote in the 5th grade was some kind of a sign, then why wasn't there intervention in the 5th grade when he was like 10 years old?
That's a damn good question.
Like, there's a lot here. What I get from most of this is that, his mother, his social systems, his schools, at every level, they failed him, just like the Parkland shooter,
Yep.
And it's like until he actually goes out and commits a mass murder, no one sees him. So this is like a way to be seen. One of the other things that he wrote or said was, relationships have absolutely no physical aspect to me. All that matters is communication. The nature of the internet fosters this. So is that, I mean, obviously this guy is, this is from an excerpt from his writing. So yeah, obviously this guy is pretty smart, but he's also trying to reach out. Like why, this is, I found it pretty fascinating, but it is not surprising. It is part of this larger pattern. He was isolated, alienated. He had to make friends online. He didn't have a lot of his social skills, and he had all these mental problems. And I don't know if he was on medication for everything and how involved his mother was. Why did he kill his mother first, right? Did he have scorn for her? He says, I incessantly have nothing other than scorn for humanity. I have been desperate to feel anything positive for someone in my life. I mean, I'm
having trouble accounting this to poor parenting. I think there was something chemically wrong with this kid.
Well, I was going to say he could just be broken, but
it may be that he killed his mother first because she was the first person that he encountered after he made the decision that he was going to kill people. It may have just been as simple as that. He was at home and she was at home.
Yeah.
So and it was weapons from the home that he used, so he would have had to have gotten those out of the home past her.
Mm-hmm. Hokey Bukisa gives us $1.99 and says touch deprivation. Again, I mean, I think it's possible, like Mike said, that this kid was just broken from the start. But
Well,
I
it
wonder
sounds
though,
from
like,
that-
I mean, how, you know, I don't know the
It
full
sounds like
story.
he had touch aversion, though, which
Yeah. Well, he
I,
says,
I've talked about this a little bit too,
Mhm.
because when I was a baby, I had touch aversion. Like
Yeah, but-
anytime anybody touched me, I threw a screaming temper tantrum, and my grandfather trained it out of me. Sat and rocked me and sang to me and showed me that it could be pleasant to be cuddled and comforted. And he didn't have somebody at home that did that, or he was not able to learn that, one or the other. And I kind of wonder, because it was kind of that masculine, this is going to change, and I'm going to see it changed. I'm going to take these actions to make it change. That came from my grandfather. That made the difference for me. So it may be that it wasn't touch deprivation with Lanza, because I still kind of understand touch aversion. If I'm not close to somebody, like I'll hug people and I like hugging people, but I don't like getting, too close otherwise. And that is something that I could see that isolating him. I look at all of this stuff, and honestly, I don't think this was inflicted necessarily all from the outside. I think that there were some things that it instead needed to be alleviated or dealt with, or not necessarily trained out of him, but therapy that should have happened, rather that failed to prevent the problem. But
Yeah.
a lot of this came from the inside, I think.
Well, here's some other stuff that he said that I thought was interesting. He says, I'm capable of boundless affection. I had never been in a situation to feel that way before, so I thought that it was special. And then there is, he talks about pedophilia and his kind of like fleeting interest, but he also wrote in a hopeful way of raising a family, albeit with another slap at what he apparently considered to be too restrictive nature of parenthood. Quote, I'm certain that I would be a phenomenal father because I would foster a free environment for my child. He would never do anything because I said so. Instead of treating her/him like a pet that can talk, I would treat her/him like a little person who doesn't know very much. I would not subject my child to my opinions. I would encourage them to think for themselves. And then he describes a perfect companion. She needs to be contemplative, introverted, introspective, insubordinate, non-confrontational, able to communicate with me, and engage in banter. And I think I want her to be at least vegetarian. So I mean, I don't know. Like I think that when people are talking about what they want, especially as parents, they're thinking about possibly the way they were raised and using that as a model from which to either add onto or subtract from. Not again, I'm speculating on all this anyways, but I still found it interesting that there was all this person had all these ideas and thoughts and on life and stuff, and we're learning about it now, and I wonder if like this is something that was pursued to begin with, like we just like this is information that I hope people in his support group, that if there was one, which it doesn't seem like there was, would have in order to sort of prevent this kind of tragedy. And not for the sake of preventing a tragedy, but for the sake of developing making all efforts that can be made to foster the growth and development of a functional human being within that capacity of him to be that. Again, working from the idea that it can be done. I don't know if this guy's just, what we said before, he could just be completely broken. But, well, I mean, I don't know. Those are just my thoughts on that.
Well, when he was describing what kind of parent he would be, it does sound like he sort of felt boxed in, controlled. And that actually is kind of typical when you're a caregiver for somebody who has a mental health condition, especially one that really results in some unusual or disturbing or inconvenient behaviors, anything like that. The caregiver, especially if it's a family member that the person lives with, and I hate to say this, but more often when it's female caregiver than a male care, it becomes very controlling. And this is something that is another reason why it's important for there to be a balance of male and female in the mentoring of a kid, that there should be both the mom and a dad there, is that moms are overcautious. Dads, by the standards of a mom, are sometimes undercautious. And between the two, they usually manage to strike a balance with the kids on how much control is exercised over the child's decision making and exploration of the world and discovery process and everything else. And it may very well be that he didn't have any freedom. It may very well be that even his ideas and thoughts and conversation was controlled, which would be torture, really, growing up.
You can see these things sort of skipping generations. Even things like authoritarianism and libertarianism. If you grew up with a very controlling parent, then you'll grow up resenting that, and you might treat your children in the opposite direction, and you'll go over the top there. You'll let them do whatever they like. You'll let them just roam free, and just bully everyone, and then you'll end up raising a little Hitler, who raises their children in a very authoritarian way. So it goes sort of goes back and forth, and that's how you control it. You control the frequency of that wave, so it doesn't go way too far in one direction. And you can do that as long as there are constants, like having two parents. Well, once you get a situation where this, where you don't have that constant, then you can get the frequency fluctuating so far in one direction that you end up with a tragedy like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I noticed is, the mention of pedophilia is disturbing in and of itself. Partly just, on the basis, largely on the basis of the fact that pedophilia itself is it's always disturbing to hear about. But because there is a history of it in being victimized in the backgrounds of so many perpetrators, it makes you wonder what inspired him to be thinking about it. Was it just a manifestation of the rest of his problems, or was he victimized? Because that also can affect the person's outcome in a lot of ways. And when you combine it with these other things, it doesn't look good. Like, it never looks good. But when you combine it with these other things, it looks like a very real possibility that would have that kind of an impact.
Yeah, it turns out that there was plans. So I will read this last bit. I know that we're getting close to 2 hours, so we gotta wrap up pretty soon. But his mother, Nancy Lanza, had hoped that her son would connect to the world around him, because he was desperately seeking to connect with people. Her notes on, but I think his autism was a problem, and because it was affecting his sensory issues. Her notes on college preparation, which appeared to have been written by her, laid out all the steps necessary for Lanza to have a meaningful experience in which he grows more socially capable. In the notes, detailed plans are made to assure that Lanza chooses a school that is accommodating to students on the autism spectrum. Lanza would have to learn about dating etiquette and dealing with peer pressure, criticism, and rejection. These are all normal things that everyone should learn. He would have to get a grip on his anxiety and depression and his sensory issues. He would have to keep a daily planner and learn about time management and make sure his driver's license was in good order. He would have to advocate for himself. But mother and son never followed through on the plans, and Lanza remained isolated at home for the next 2 years leading up to the murders. His yearnings for connections did not stop at relationships with other people. He also yearned to connect with his own feelings, with himself. So I think we're looking at, it seems to me that what we're looking at is someone who is desperately looking to connect, and it just didn't happen. Even though his mother had made plans to do that, and he ended up isolated all the way up until he committed the murders. I'm not saying that one is the cause of the other, but I think that when people are isolated for long enough, it actually really takes a toll. Even people who claim to be loners need to connect. So,
Yeah. In fact, if you put somebody in solitary and you deprive them of human contact for most of the day, there are documented types of mental health damage that happen because of that. And of course, we here in the United States do that to more prisoners, I think, than any other country. I know we do it to more children than any other country. So it's to be isolated like that would be a big contributing factor. I think everything together in what's described here is just a perfect storm of contributing factors that hit somebody with a base of mental health conditions, and he was lacking a father at home. And I think that just all together, with all of those things together, it was not necessarily inevitable, but a definite likely path that he ended up on.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just wanted you guys to see this. Maybe I put a link to the full story. It's very long, but you should check it out and tell us your thoughts on this Adam Lanza info. Do you think that, this is just like some broken man, that this was completely unavoidable? Or do you think that there is something to sort of talking about it now that this info is out? Because I know that people are going to look at the Sandy Hook shooter and they're just going to say, well, toxic masculinity, boys go crazy. He should have been allowed to express his feelings, the usual bullshit. But I think that this is a guy who was, I think the system let him down on some level. And at the very least, not even just to save him, but to protect all those people. His mother's the one who brought all the guns in the house, and that basically it allowed him to get access. And I'm not making the anti-gun argument, but this is a factor, right? So I don't know. Give us
that
your
was
thoughts.
Probably not the best therapeutic idea on her part. No.
So give us your thoughts on this story and the other ones. I'm gonna check and see if you guys have any super chats. We do. Ciara de Flora gives us $5 and says, with how much we know about ASD now, it is surprising Parkland and Umpqua shooters did not get more support than I did in the 90s. I think a lot of boys fall through the cracks, man. Hokey Bukisa gives us $1.99 and says, lol, would you like fries with that? I don't have I missed that reference. I don't know what that was in response to. But thank you anyway for the all the support and all the donations. So we're...
I got to point out the argument that they make regarding toxic masculinity and claiming that, he should have been allowed to express his feelings. Well, he did. He did express his feelings, and nobody listened.
That's exactly right. It doesn't matter that you express your feelings and talk about all you want. I mean, look at all that he's written. If no one wants to listen, and I get that communicating with people who are very far on the spectrum requires a professional, probably requires a professional training to do so. But I mean, I don't know. I get the feeling that not enough was done. That's all I can say. I don't know, though, so I could be completely wrong. All right, with that said, we're going to go ahead and go on to the after show. We're going to be looking at this Good Man Project. It's time to be governed by women. I want to thank you guys for joining us on this episode of HBR News. And I want to thank the people who came on with me. Do you guys want to say any final words before I close out the show about anything? Do you have anything that you need to shill or just comments? No?
Just give us the shekels. Just imagine me here rubbing my hands like.
Oh
like
yeah.
Cortez.
Give us
Feed
yes,
the badger.
Give us the shekels.
Feed the badger. The badger is hungry.
Yeah, so it could also be because he was on medication. Absolutely. So, like, yeah, make a comment about that. But what do you know about it? I don't know much about this stuff. So, leave us a comment. Also, subscribe to this channel. This is where the live streams will be. And be sure to hit that like button. You know, do it however you need to do it. Do it with your nose, do it with your clam, whatever. And for now, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Please, if you want to join us in the after show, you can do so through Feed the Badger. I believe that we have that in there. If you are still on Patreon, that's okay. I don't know how long we're going to be on Patreon, though. So we might come up with something new and leave. But we will keep you guys updated either way. If anything, we're going to let you guys go now. Thanks for coming on this episode of HBR News. Have a lovely